February 1971, the Copa Room at the Sands Hotel was doing what it did best on Saturday nights, transforming desert air into something that felt like magic. 2,000 people packed into red velvet seats, crystal chandeliers, casting warm light over tables where champagne bottles sweated in silver buckets, and cigarette smoke drifted toward the ceiling in lazy spirals. Dean Martin was 3 songs into his set. Everybody Loves Somebody had the crowd swaying. That's Amore had them singing along. Now he was moving into Ain't That a Kick in the Head, and the energy in the room was building toward that perfect crescendo where entertainment became transcendence. Then Dean saw the security guards moving, 2 men in black suits walking with purpose along the back wall. They were heading towards someone standing near the exit, a man in shadows. Dean's voice didn't falter. Years of performing had taught him to track everything in a room while appearing to notice nothing, but his attention shifted. The man they were approaching wasn't dressed for the Copa Room. While everyone else wore tuxedos and evening gowns, this man wore what looked like an old military jacket. Even from the stage, Dean could see it was torn at the shoulder. The man's hair was long, unkempt. His face was weathered in a way that spoke of years spent outdoors. He wasn't bothering anyone, just standing there watching the show from the free space at the back. But in a place like the Sands, where image was everything and every square foot was monetized, his presence was a problem that needed to be solved. Dean watched the security guards reach the man, saw one of them put a hand on the man's arm, saw the man's head drop, his shoulders slump in a gesture of defeat so complete it looked like physical pain. The man turned to leave. He didn't argue, didn't protest, just accepted that he didn't belong here, that he'd been foolish to think he could stand in the back of a room and watch Dean Martin sing. Dean stopped singing. The band, confused, kept playing for 3 more bars before trailing off into silence. The audience, thinking this was part of the show, waited expectantly, but Dean wasn't looking at them. He was looking at the back of the room at the security guards now escorting the man toward the exit. "Hold on," Dean said into the microphone. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the Copa Room. "Hold on just a second." He set the microphone down on the piano, walked off the stage. The audience murmured uncertainly. Dean's manager, Herman Citron, appeared from the wings, looking panicked, but Dean waved him off. Dean walked through the showroom, past tables of confused wealthy patrons, past waiters frozen with trays in their hands, straight to the back where the security guards had stopped, still holding the man's arm. "What's happening here?" Dean asked. The senior guard, a man named Richards, looked uncomfortable. "Just removing a vagrant, Mr. Martin. He shouldn't be in here. We're handling it." Dean looked at the man. Up close, the military jacket was unmistakable. U.S. Army, probably Korean War era based on the style. The patches were faded but still visible. The man's face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, in a way Dean recognized. He'd seen that look before in Steubenville during the Depression in men who'd come back from wars and couldn't find their way back to being human. "What's your name?" Dean asked gently. The man's voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Bobby Chen, Korean War infantry." Dean nodded. "Were you bothering anyone?" "No, sir, just watching from back here. Didn't mean to cause trouble." Dean turned to Richards. "Was he bothering anyone?" "Well, no, but Mr. Martin, he's not a paying customer. He's a veteran," Dean interrupted. His voice wasn't loud, but something in it made Richards stop talking. He served his country, and now he wants to watch a show. "That bothering you?" "It's not about me, sir. It's hotel policy." Dean looked at Bobby again, saw the man's hands shaking slightly, saw the way he held himself proud, despite everything. Still standing straight, even though every instinct was probably telling him to run. "Bobby, you have somewhere to stay tonight?" Bobby's jaw tightened. "I'm managing." "That's not what I asked." Silence. Come with me, Dean said. He walked back through the Copa Room with Bobby following. The audience watched in confused silence. Herman was gesturing frantically from the wings, but Dean ignored him. He walked backstage, Bobby trailing behind, and went straight to his dressing room. Dean pulled out his wallet, withdrew several bills. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a hotel room key. Room 8047, Dean said, holding out the key. It's my room. I was going to stay here this week, but I'll stay at my house instead. You take the room. There's a shower, clean towels, room service. You order whatever you want and charge it to the room. Bobby stared at the key like it was a hallucination. I can't. You served in Korea? Yes, sir. 2 tours. Infantry. See combat? Bobby's face changed. Something shuddered behind his eyes. Yes, sir. Dean pressed the key into Bobby's hand. Then you've earned a week in a nice room. No arguments. You take this key, you go upstairs, you take a long shower, you order a steak, and you sleep in a real bed. That clear? Bobby's hands were shaking harder now. Why would you do this? Because you served your country, and nobody should have to watch a show from the shadows. Dean's voice was quiet. And because I can. Sometimes that's reason enough. I don't deserve... Stop. Dean's voice was gentle but firm. You fought for your country. You came home to a world that didn't know what to do with you. You're still standing, still trying. That deserves respect. So you take this room, and you don't tell yourself stories about what you deserve or don't deserve. You just accept that someone sees you, okay? Bobby's eyes were wet. Okay. Good. Now I have to go finish a show. You go upstairs, get cleaned up. We'll talk tomorrow. Dean walked back onto the stage. The audience applauded uncertainly. Dean picked up the microphone, nodded to the band, and launched back into Ain't That a Kick in the Head like nothing had happened. But something had happened. People had seen Dean Martin walk off stage in the middle of a song to help someone. Word spread through the casino. By the time Dean finished his set, everyone at the Sands knew some version of the story. After the show, Dean's manager cornered him in his dressing room. Dean? What the hell was that? You can't just walk off stage in the middle of a number? I just did. That man could be dangerous, could be unstable. You gave him your hotel room key. Do you know how that looks? Dean was taking off his bow tie, looking at Herman in the mirror. How does it look? Like you're out of your mind. Security is going to have fits, the hotel management. Herman, Dean's voice was calm. That man served 2 tours in Korea. He came home to a country that forgot about him. He's living on the streets, and tonight he just wanted to stand in the back of a room and hear some music. That's all. Just wanted to be around people instead of invisible. I understand that. Do you really understand what it's like to be invisible? To have people look through you like you're not there? Herman was quiet. Bobby Chen fought for this country, Dean continued. He saw things that would break most men. He came home, and there was no parade, no welcome, just confusion and judgment and a world that moved on without him. And now he's living in alleys, trying to figure out how to be human again. So yeah, I gave him a room for a week. It's the least I could do. The hotel is going to do nothing because I'm Dean Martin and I sell out this room every night. If they have a problem with me helping a veteran, they can find another headliner. Herman sighed. He knew when Dean's mind was made up. What happens after the week? I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. The next morning, Dean went to room 8047. Bobby answered, looking transformed, clean, shaved, wearing one of the hotel robes. His eyes were clearer. He still looked haunted, but less like a ghost. How'd you sleep? Dean asked. Longest I've slept in 3 years. Kept waking up thinking I was dreaming. You order food? Room service brought breakfast. I didn't know what to order, so I just said eggs. They brought enough food for 5 people. Dean smiled. That's how room service works. You eat some, couldn't finish it all? Felt wrong. Wasting food. It's not wasting if you're full. That's called having enough. They sat in the room. Bobby on the bed. Dean in the armchair by the window. Morning light was coming in, hitting the strip below where workers were already setting up for another day of manufactured glamour. Tell me about Korea, Dean said. Bobby looked surprised. People don't usually want to hear about that. I do. So Bobby told him. Not the sanitized version you'd tell strangers at a bar. The real version about the cold that went through your bones. About friends who were there one moment and gone the next. About the things you had to do to survive and the way those things lived inside you forever after. Dean listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't try to make it better. Just listened. When Bobby finished, his voice was raw. I came home and I didn't know how to be normal. Couldn't hold a job. Couldn't be around people. Every loud noise was incoming fire. Every shadow was a threat. I had a wife, had a daughter. They tried to help, but I just pushed them away. Pushed everyone away. Ended up on the street. Easier that way. Safer. Safer for who? For them. I'm not safe to be around. Dean leaned forward. Bobby, you're sitting here having a conversation. You took a shower. You ate breakfast. You're not dangerous. You're traumatized. There's a difference. The VA doesn't know what to do with guys like me. The VA doesn't know what to do with a lot of things. That doesn't mean you can't get help. I've tried. I know. I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm saying the system failed you. Your country asked you to go do impossible things, then brought you home and expected you to be fine. That's not on you, but you're here now. You're alive, and you can choose what happens next. Bobby's voice was barely audible. What if I don't know how? Then we figure it out together. Over the next week, Dean did something he'd never done before. He called in favors, talked to doctors he knew, found a psychiatrist at Cedars-Sinai who specialized in what was then called combat fatigue and would later be known as PTSD. Got Bobby an appointment, paid for it himself. He talked to the VA, used his celebrity to cut through bureaucracy, got Bobby enrolled in a program for homeless veterans, found him a spot in a halfway house that specialized in helping vets transition back to civilian life. He didn't make a big deal of it, didn't hold press conferences, didn't use it for publicity, just quietly made calls, signed checks, opened doors that had been closed. On Bobby's last night in the hotel room, Dean came by with dinner. They ate together, looking out at the Las Vegas Strip lighting up as dusk fell. Why are you doing this? Bobby asked. Really? You don't know me. I'm nobody. Dean set down his fork. You want the truth? Yes, sir. My father came to this country with nothing. Worked in a barber shop in Steubenville, Ohio. Some days he cut hair. Some days he worked in the back room where they ran an illegal casino. He did what he had to do to feed his family. People looked down on him, looked through him like he was invisible, because he was an immigrant, because he didn't speak English well, because he worked with his hands. Dean paused, remembering. And I watched my mother clean rich people's houses, watched her scrub floors and cook meals for families who'd never invite her to eat at their table, watched her be invisible in rooms full of people who thought they were better than her just because they had money she didn't have. Bobby listened. I got lucky, Dean continued. Got a voice that people wanted to hear. Made more money than my father could have imagined. But I never forgot what it felt like to watch my parents be treated like they didn't matter. Like they were less than human, just because they were working-class immigrants. He looked at Bobby. When I saw security escorting you out last night, you know what I saw? I saw my father. I saw my mother. I saw every person who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong somewhere because they don't have money or status or the right clothes. And I couldn't let it stand. Not in a room where I was entertaining. Not when I had the power to do something about it. Bobby's eyes were wet. You see me. I see you. And so do a lot of other people. You just forgot that because the world's been cruel. But you're not invisible, Bobby. You never were? They sat in silence for a while. Two men from different worlds who'd found common ground in understanding what it meant to be overlooked. The program starts Monday, Dean said finally. You'll have a place to stay. You'll have doctors who understand what you're going through. You'll have other vets who know what it's like. It's going to be hard work, Bobby. Harder than anything except maybe what you did in Korea. But if you stick with it, if you do the work, you can build a life again. What if I fail? Then you fail and you try again. That's what life is. You keep trying until you figure it out. I don't know how to thank you. Dean stood up, put his hand on Bobby's shoulder. You thank me by doing the work, by showing up for yourself the way you showed up for your country, by remembering that you matter. That's all the thanks I need. Dean Martin continued performing at the Sands. The story of what he'd done for Bobby spread quietly through the veteran community. Other vets started showing up at his shows, standing respectfully at the back. Dean made sure security never bothered them again. Bobby Chen stayed in the program, did the work. Slowly, painfully. He learned how to live with his memories instead of being destroyed by them. He learned that trauma doesn't disappear, but it can be managed, that you can carry scars and still build something. 2 years later, Bobby got a job as a counselor at the same VA program that had helped him. Started helping other homeless vets find their way back. He was good at it. He understood what they were going through in a way textbooks couldn't teach. He wrote Dean a letter, thanked him, told him about the work he was doing now, told him that every veteran he helped was partly Dean's doing because Dean had been the one to see him when he was invisible. Dean wrote back a short letter. You did the work, Bobby. I just held the door open. Proud of you. They stayed in touch over the years. Not frequent correspondence, but enough. Birthday cards, updates. Bobby would send Dean articles about advances in PTSD treatment. Dean would send Bobby tickets to shows whenever he performed in L.A. In 1987, Dean's son died. Dean Paul Martin killed in a plane crash. Dean was devastated, withdrew from public life, stopped performing. The light went out of him in a way that scared everyone who knew him. Bobby heard about it, flew to Los Angeles, showed up at Dean's house unannounced. Dean's daughter, Dina, answered the door. Can I help you? My name is Bobby Chen. Your father helped me a long time ago. I'd like to see him if that's possible. Dina studied him. Something in his face told her this was important. Wait here. She came back 5 minutes later. He'll see you. Dean was in his living room looking older than Bobby remembered. The loss of his son had aged him in ways that went beyond years. He looked up when Bobby entered. Bobby Chen, it's been a long time. Yes, sir. I'm sorry to intrude. I heard about your son. I wanted to... Bobby stopped. Wasn't sure what he wanted to say. Dean gestured to a chair. Bobby sat. They were quiet for a long moment. Then Bobby spoke. In February 1971, I was standing in the back of the Copa Room. I was homeless, hungry, barely holding on. I just wanted to hear some music to feel human for an hour. And you stopped your show, walked across the room, gave me your hotel room key, gave me back my life. Dean's eyes were wet. You asked me why I'm here, Bobby continued. I'm here because you taught me something that night. You taught me that when someone is drowning, you throw them a rope. You don't ask if they deserve it. You don't worry about whether it's convenient. You just throw the rope." He leaned forward. "Mr. Martin, you're drowning right now. I can see it. Losing your son. I can't imagine that pain. I won't pretend to understand it, but I understand grief. I understand what it's like when the darkness is so heavy you can't breathe. And I'm here to throw you a rope." Dean wiped his eyes. "I don't know if I want to be saved." I didn't either. In 1971, I thought I was too far gone. Thought I was better off invisible. But you wouldn't let me disappear. So I'm not going to let you disappear either. Bobby stayed for 3 hours. Didn't try to fix anything. Didn't offer empty platitudes. Just sat with Dean in his grief. Told him stories about the work he was doing with veterans, about the lives being saved, about how Dean's one act of kindness in 1971 had rippled out in ways he couldn't imagine. "There's a vet in San Diego right now," Bobby said. "Name's Marcus. He was living under a bridge. I found him last month. Got him into treatment. He's clean now, starting to rebuild. And you know what I told him when he asked me why I cared? I told him about a night in February 1971 when a famous singer stopped his show to help a nobody in a torn army jacket. I told him that kindness is a rope we throw to each other when we're drowning. And I told him that someday when he's strong enough, he'll throw that rope to someone else." Dean was crying now. "I miss my son. I know. He was everything. My best friend, my pride, and he's gone. He was, and he is. And you're still here. And that matters." They sat together until the sun set. When Bobby left, Dean walked him to the door. "Thank you for coming," Dean said. "Thank you for seeing me." In 1971, when I needed to be seen. Bobby Chen continued his work with homeless veterans for another 20 years. He helped hundreds of men find their way back from the darkness. He married, had children, built a life that would have seemed impossible in February 1971. When Dean Martin died on Christmas Day 1995, Bobby Chen was at the funeral. He stood in the back like he had all those years ago at the Copa Room. But this time he belonged. This time he wasn't invisible. He carried a photograph taken in March 1971, right before Bobby left the halfway house program. Dean had driven out to visit, surprised Bobby. Someone had snapped a photo. Dean's arm around Bobby's shoulders. Both men smiling. It was one of Bobby's most treasured possessions. After the funeral, Dean and Martin approached him. "You're Bobby Chen." "Yes, ma'am." "My father talked about you. Said you were one of the best things he ever did." Bobby's voice cracked. "He saved my life." He said you saved his after Dino died. Said you reminded him why it mattered to keep going. They stood together looking at the photograph. Two people connected by a man who'd understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is see someone when they're invisible. Bobby kept that photograph on his desk at the VA for the rest of his career. When veterans asked about it, he'd tell them the story about a night in February 1971, about a singer who stopped mid-song, about a hotel room key that changed everything. "Dean Martin taught me something," Bobby would say. "He taught me that dignity isn't something you earn. It's something you already have. Sometimes you just need someone to remind you." The veterans would listen, and sometimes when they were struggling, when the darkness seemed too heavy, Bobby would show them the photograph again. "You see this? This is what hope looks like. This is proof that when you're drowning, someone will throw you a rope. And someday when you're strong enough, you'll throw that rope to someone else. That's how we survive. That's how we build lives worth living, one rope at a time." Years after both Dean and Bobby had died, a documentary filmmaker was researching Dean Martin's life. She found Bobby's daughter, who'd inherited her father's papers. Among them was a letter Dean had written to Bobby in 1985. "You asked me once why I helped you that night in 1971. I told you about my parents, about watching them be invisible. That was true. But there's more. I helped you because I could, and because seeing you standing there trying to be human again reminded me that entertainment isn't the most important thing. Dignity is. Connection is. Remembering that we're all just people trying to make it through. You didn't need my hotel room. You needed to know that someone saw you, that your life mattered, that you weren't invisible. I gave you a room. You gave me perspective. You reminded me what real courage looks like. It's not performing on stage. It's showing up every day when everything inside you is screaming to give up. It's doing the work, even when the work is impossible. Thank you for throwing me the rope in 1987. I was drowning and didn't know it. Or maybe I knew it but didn't care anymore. You cared when I couldn't. That saved me. We're even now. Your friend, Dean. The filmmaker included the letter in her documentary. It became one of the most shared clips from the film. People responded to it in ways that surprised everyone, because the story wasn't really about Dean Martin the celebrity. It was about Dean Martin the man who stopped a show to help someone, the man who understood that having power means using it to help people who don't have power. And it was about Bobby Chen, the veteran who refused to disappear, who did the impossible work of healing, who spent his life throwing ropes to other people drowning. It was about two men who taught each other that dignity matters, that seeing people matters, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is stop mid-song and walk across a room to help someone who needs it. The Copa Room at the Sands Hotel is gone now. The entire hotel was imploded in 1996. But the story lives on. In the hundreds of veterans Bobby helped, in the documentary, in the memory of a February night in 1971, when Dean Martin proved that real power isn't about fame or money. Real power is about seeing people when they're invisible and throwing them a rope when they're drowning. That's Dean Martin's legacy. Not the songs, though they were great. Not the movies, though they entertained millions. But the moment when he stopped performing and started helping, when he remembered that beyond the lights and the applause, we're all just human beings trying to make it through.